Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. You have found yourself listening to episode 320 of the podcast, and it is one in which I interact with your questions, with your comments, with your feedback. I call it Fly Fishing Accusations, because although I ask for accusations, and I've been doing so for a long time, they only come in few and far between. Usually it's nice comments and good-hearted questions. And that's exactly what I'm going to get to today. Two kind of comments about fly rods and one about downsizing, which is an interesting topic that probably I should talk about more on the podcast since I talk about gear so much. I want to give that equal time. But before I get to that, it might sound a little bit different. The audio might sound different. To be honest with you, I'm not super pleased with the audio. I had awesome audio for the podcast when I was with a previous hosting platform. This one I've been with for a while, although it has a lot of benefits. I feel like the audio quality is suffering, and so I've done what I can do to try to fix it, but it is what it is. We'll see what we can do in the future. But I'm also in a new space right now. I'm in my new home office. It's in the basement. I have all of my bookshelves, and I have a new desk, and I have windows, and I have all of my tchotchkes, and a lot of great things around. Things that you'll be able to see here very, very soon. More information on that when I actually figure out what's going on. But with all that said, administrative details aside, I'm going to dive right into the first question/comment. Actually, it's a comment. So I don't know if you remember, but a few weeks ago I did a podcast called The Walmart Angler. Talked about just getting inexpensive stuff and being okay with it, because if you're catching fish, then that's all you need to worry about. So this is an email from Jay, and I'm actually going to do some buzz marketing for Sawmill Fly Casting in New York. So it says, "Hi, Matthew, Jay Engel, owner of Sawmill Fly Casting, New York State Fishing Guide, casting instructor from Yonkers, New York. I'm a fan of your podcast, just listened to your Walmart Angler episode and wanted to say I'm also a fan of inexpensive yet pretty decent fly fishing gear sometimes. When I was starting in 2019, getting guide license during the pandemic, I needed practice rods for all my students. I ended up purchasing 3 to 4 weight and 5 to 6 weight rods from Eagle Claw. They're called the featherweight rods. They're very parabolic yet very useful in that they teach you to cast with a smooth, accelerated casting stroke. If you try to overpower the cast, it won't go well. Anyway, I think they are great teaching rods and even work well on most small to medium-sized streams. I teach for a class for the village in my county, and the class seems to do great with them. And for $34.99 on Amazon or direct from Eagle Claw, I highly recommend them. Take care. Good luck, Jay." Well, I appreciate Jay reaching out. And again, if you are in that area, check out sawmillflycast.com. That's sawmillflycast.com. And that is Jay's business where he's teaching and instructing. So I agree wholeheartedly. I've actually cast one of these rods, an Eagle Claw, and I think it does great work. And like he said, for small and medium-sized streams, does great work. For teaching people how to cast, how to not be too aggressive in their stroke, it does great work. And you can do a whole lot worse for $35. You can do a whole lot worse for $70 for that matter, or $170. But this reminds me actually of a great gift that was given to me back when I was running a fly fishing education program. A big conservation organization, not specifically fly fishing, but a big conservation organization said, "Hey, we're going to hook you all up with a bunch of fly fishing gear because we want these kids that you're teaching to have all the gear that they need." And so I thought, okay, that's great. And they said, "Well, it's going to be a big box." I said, "All right, well, don't send it to my P.O. box, send it to my house." So this big box comes. I'm all excited. I tell the other people on the board, I said, "Hey, we got all these rods and reels and lines and leaders and backing for these kids. Would you guys want to get together and we can assemble all of it?" Because it all came disassembled, line not on the reels and backing not tied to the line and so on and so forth. And so they said, "Yeah, we'll do that. It'll be great." We're excited to see what they got. And we opened up the box together, and it was all generic stuff. I mean, it was branded with one of the kind of mid-tier fly fishing company brands, but it was definitely low-end stuff with just a label slapped on it. And before anyone touched it, the groaning started. Now, you have to understand, these are grown men. These are with jobs and perspective on life. And not all of them were grumbling, but a couple of them were grumbling. But I guess that is probably pretty accurate with any group of people that you are with. But they were grumbling because they weren't, even the low end stuff from Orvis or Sage or whoever. It was something kind of generic. Well, you took one out and you put your line on it, and you start casting, you realize this is actually really good. Not only is it really good, but it's perfect for teaching fly casting for the very reasons Jay kind of pointed out, the Eagle Claw featherweight. And they cost us nothing. I think these rods would have been, $50. So all the combo would have been $75, the ones that we had. But they did a great, great job teaching casting and fishing on that little stream. I actually enjoyed casting them. They fit my stroke. That medium to medium fast is like my preferred stroke, and I think is the best stroke for teaching people how to cast, because there's no reward for flapping your rod from 3 to 9, 3 to 9, 3 to 9. You can almost do something with a fast rod when it's really, really stiff and you're making those fast movements. But for a traditional, productive, technically sound fly cast, having a smoother, softer rod is really a good way to go. So I don't think I've cast the Eagle Claw featherweight, but I know I've held them, and I've cast Eagle Claw rods, and I think their highest end rod is like $150. But I know I have antique Eagle Claw fly rods that are a lot of fun to cast. They're incredibly slow and incredibly heavy, but they're fun to cast. And so I would say check this out if you're in the market for a 3 to 4 or a 5/6 weight, which again, let me talk about that real quick. Some of you might be saying, what's that? Well, there are rods today that are still made this way, high-end rods as well as budget rods. And this is something that you've seen since rods have gone to the line weight designation system, going away from the 3-letter system. And sometimes they are slated to be a 3/4 or a 5/6, 4/5, something like that. Well, the reason is that they can, you pair it with a 3, it's a little bit faster and more crisp. You pair it with a 4 and it slows down a little bit. It goes from being maybe a medium fast action with that 3 weight to more of a true medium action with that 4 weight. So that's what happens when you see those line designations. And here's the other trick. You can do that with any rod. Any rod. You put a 5 weight on a 6 weight rod, and it's going to make it really fast. It might not be ideal, but it's going to work. Put a 7-weight line on that, it's going to slow it down a lot. But anyway, there are rods that are designed for that. And it's great, too, with a entry-level rod, is you have that flexibility. You're budget conscious, or you primarily fish on big water. You're just like, I don't care. I just want to get something cheap to go chase brookies. You buy this, and you say, oh, I'll throw a 3-weight on there, and it's going to work great. And if you don't like it, you throw a 4-weight on there, or you can use both, or use whatever you have. So anyway, all I had to say, Jay makes a great recommendation, as well as a great comment on something that I think is important, which is having equipment that people can learn on and not worrying about what that label says. If it works, it works. All right. This is a comment from Daniel on an article that I wrote called Curating Your Own Fly Fishing Library. Curating Your Own Fly Fishing Library. And he writes, in the process of downsizing for a second time, I jettisoned crazy fly fishing books on the first go-round. This time I told my wife that keeping my fly fishing and watercolor paintings books out and not in boxes was non-negotiable. She says, okay, but it has to fit in the guest bedroom, office, stereo room. So I lined the walls with bookshelves and moved 21 banker's boxes of books in that room. Her hellscape is my cozy happy place. First book I bought was a 2-volume Trout by Schweibert, autographed in the 70s. All right, a lot of stuff there. And we'll start with marriage counseling. Just kidding. I'm sure that Daniel and his wife are happy as clams with their house and his room. Secondly, guest bedroom / office / stereo room. That sounds fantastic. And at least you have a bed in your office and your stereo room, so you can lay down as you think or need to get rest. The other question that the question I had was, he said he jettisoned crazy fly fishing books. Is that crazy in volume or crazy in content? I'm curious about that. And then lastly, he said that the first book he bought was the 2-volume Trout by Schweibert. Now, he's swinging for the fences with that one, and he connected, especially because it's autographed. I have that volume. I think mine is autographed too. I bought it at an estate sale. Well, actually, no, it was an estate sale. It was an estate sale or a big donation to a local TU chapter, and I bought it through an auction on their website. But anyway, that's a great volume, something that I'll be talking about here momentarily. Not today, but in the near future. But anyway, all that to say, Daniel brought up getting rid of books before. Now, I mentioned that when you're starting off, you want to keep everything. I'm thinking even of some of the books I have on my bookshelf still, and like books that my kids got for Christmas this year. It's like, wild hunting stories, crazy outdoor stories. And that's not necessarily the kind of thing that I'm going to go out and buy today, But when I started off, it was really cool to have a diversity of books on my bookshelf. I had books that were about technique. I had books that were about destinations. I had great novels. And I also had these fun little, bathroom readers. And they were all a good part of my library. Whereas I'm not chasing those down anymore. And the ones that I owned weren't super nostalgic or anything like that. Those are the kind of books that were great to keep when you're starting out, but as space becomes a premium, those are the things that you do want to get rid of. Now, that said, I think if you have the space, then by all means, fill it with books, even if they're of medium quality. So recently, I put together my home office, which has got all of my workbooks, so it's all theology and philosophy and history and that sort of stuff. And then my fly fishing and my novels and all that stuff is upstairs in the living room, where people can see them and we can enjoy them. And I first really pared down my selection. I maybe took 30% and left it in boxes. Well, I put stuff on the shelf and I still have a lot of shelf space, so I kind of brought another 15% up. And the other 15% I'm looking at and I'm thinking, I don't have any desire to put these on the bookshelf. So I've actually have a box that as I go to the fly fishing shows this winter and present, I'm going to have a box of books that if you're the first one there, you can come through and take what you want. Some of it's really good stuff. Some of it's just things that might interest you, or if you're starting your fly fishing library, then you just have a nice little boost on collecting and curating a collection. But I think this is something that everyone has to find that balance. How much space do you have? Is it space that is your own, or is it space that is shared? What are you trying to do? Are you just trying to fill a shelf, or are you trying to fill a shelf with the right kind of books? But anyway, I think that Daniel makes a good point that sometimes you get rid of things because you feel like you need to, but if you really don't need to, and down the line you might want them, then by all means keep them. I'm actually right now going through tubs. I have 4 tubs set aside on the carpet next to me with just random office things. I mean, everything from a Lego skyline of the city of Chicago to a rubber chicken to a bunch of coffee mugs to a carved wooden fish from Kazakhstan. I'm looking at him thinking, some of those things I might want to put up. Some of them could go in a tub. Some of them probably could get thrown away. And it's the same thing with your fly fishing books and your fly fishing stuff, which, again, I think that is a conversation that warrants more and a longer treatment at some point in time in the future. All right, so my third and final piece of feedback is another fly rod one. It comes from David. So David says, hello, I don't know if I'd consider it a favorite rod or not, but I own an Orvis Helios 4F 7.5 foot 2-weight. It's a rod I'd love to hear you to review. Also, the 7 foot 3-weight in the 4D. Thank you. Okay, so basically, David's saying, what are your thoughts on the Orvis Helios 2-weight and 3-weight in 7.5 foot, the 4F and the 4D? So if those of you who are unfamiliar, this is Orvis's top of the line graphite rod. It's in its 4th generation now, and they have, in the last 2 generations, I believe, gone to an F and a D distinction. And this is kind of cool because this is when I started with Orvis, both as a shopper and as I worked for Orvis for a while, you could buy within the same rod series different flex profiles. So you could buy the nicest rod they make in a 9 foot 5-weight, and you could buy one that had a medium flex, and you could buy one that had a tip flex. So if you really liked that rod, or you were just a big Orvis fan, or you just wanted the best that Orvis had to offer, you could get the best, and it could be 2 totally different rods in the same length and line weight, which I thought was very cool, and it allowed people with different casting strokes to try a rod that had a very, very similar profile with just a very different taper. I kind of wish that more companies would do that. I kind of wish that Orvis would go back to it in a greater degree. But and this was like a number system. I think the slowest back in the superfine, the unsanded superfine blanks was like 3 or 3.5, and then you got up to like some of the saltwaters, and I think they were 10s maybe. Anyway, not 10 weights, but like the 10 was the tip flex, and then most rods fell between like the 5.5 and the 7.5. So anyway, all that to say, the 4D are going to be the faster, or the Ds are going to be the faster rods. The Fs are going to be the slower rods. So these particular rods I've not fished with, and I like them a lot. I would say that if you have a friendly Orvis store near you, and hopefully you do, or a friendly shop that sells Orvis, go and say, hey, I'd like to cast the D and the F in the same length and weight, and just kind of get an appreciation for what's happening here, how they're built differently, how they're going to be different fishing tools, how one might be better than another. And I think another benefit for this for you, and I don't know if this is necessarily what you're going for, David, in your question or your desire for review, is by going back and forth between one rod and the other. You might say, you know what? I feel like I always said I liked faster action rods, but this medium action rod, or this, I thought I would like the D, but the F is a really, really nice rod, and I found the opposite for me. I always say that, I like the softer rods. I like something that has a little bit more finesse to it, literally. And when I went and cast, I think it was most recently the newest, 9-foot 5 weights back to back. I like the D a lot better. I like the one that was built for distance and not for finesse. And I felt like I could do really well with it, even at that 20, 25, 30, 35-foot range. So that's a great thing to look at, whether you're looking at the 7.5 foot 4-weight or 2-weight or any other rod. Now, with that said, I think one would say that generally speaking, most people would say I think the F would be better for small stream fishing. I don't believe that. I don't think that's true. And one of the things that you probably heard me say in other contexts, other podcasts, other articles, is that I like a crisper, snappier rod when I am casting on small streams for a number of reasons. And you'll hear me talk about this at the presentations, and you'll see this at other places. But the quick breakdown is this. I can control my line speed better. I can control my back cast better, and I can make more complicated casts in close quarters better with a faster rod than with a slower rod. I don't feel like I'm compromising on feel. I feel like I'm compromising on touch. I don't feel like I'm compromising on sensitivity with trout if you have a good rod and you know what you're doing. So I'd rather have a little bit of a faster rod on the small stream. So without fishing with these rods, my quick snap judgment on the Helios, the most current generation and the previous generation, when it comes to the F versus the D distinctions in those 2-weights and 3-weights, I prefer the faster rod for actually fishing. The Fs are awesome for casting, and I would say if I was fishing on a really wide open stream that had smaller fish or something like that, then I would say the F would be totally fine. But on a normal mountain trout stream situation, I think the D works better in those weights. But hey, I'm always happy to change my mind, and I'm always happy to test out rods if anyone wants to send one my way. Well, 3 good interactions, 3 good emails. Always happy to hear from you with what you have to say, whether it be a question, whether it be a comment, whether it be an accusation. All those things I'm happy to get back to you personally, and then every once in a while it makes it to a podcast episode. All right, this week on the podcast, first article, a little bit of a repeat, but it was called Update, Casting Across Presentations at the Fly Fishing Show. So as I mentioned last week, and as you see online, I'm going to be presenting at the Fly Fishing Show this winter. But what I didn't talk about last week, which I'm talking about this week, is I'm also scheduled to make a presentation at the Edison Show in New Jersey, the premier show of the whole fly fishing show circuit. So here are my 3 presentations. The first 2 are in Marlborough, Massachusetts on January 17th. That's a Friday at noon. That's the Translating Small Stream Skills to Big Water. Again, Friday, noon, Room C. And then Saturday, the 18th, 10 a.m., Room B, that's Advanced Small Stream Tactics. So if you want more details on what those presentations pertain to, then you can go to last week's podcast or you can go to the website. And then on Friday, January 24th at 4:45 p.m. in the Strike Room, I am running a seminar on translating small stream skills to big water. So this is a little bit of a different presentation. I'm not expecting anybody to go to both of them, but if you are in New Jersey, it's a little bit of a broader perspective on this topic, just based on a couple of details. But that is, again, on Friday the 24th, closing out that show. That show usually does get busier on Friday in the afternoon, so I'm looking forward to having a good crowd there. So again, if you are in Marlborough, Mass, or in Edison, New Jersey, I'd love for you to come out and be a part of those presentations. Wednesday's article was called It's Christmas because it was Christmas. And there I share one of my favorite hymns, as I've done a handful of times over the last few years on Christmas. Whenever Christmas lands on or near a date when a article comes out on the website. This week's recommendation on the podcast is actually kind of a part two to the comment on the recommendation on the Eagle Claw featherweight rod. So here's the deal. You're going to find rods oftentimes cheaper than you are reels and line. Now, you can find a really decent rod for a very, very budget price, like I was talking about earlier. But a reel is going to be a totally different situation. There's not a part on a rod that can break. There are parts on reels that can break. And good fly line is one of the most essential reasons that people go from being an okay caster to a good caster. And so this week's recommendation is going to be the Crosswater 4 reel from Redington, and you can get it pre-spooled for under $110. And it is a just a simple cast reel that is going to be great for any sort of freshwater fishing that you have to contend with, but it is a disc drag. It's a good disc drag for what it is. Is it going to stop bonefish? No, it is not. Is it going to slow down big angry steelhead? Maybe. Honestly, it might. But for $110, you get the rod, you get the reel, you get the line, you get the backing, and it's all put together for you. And so, yeah, you're still looking at $150 all together if you get that and like a $50 rod. But if you're looking for a good economical reel that has solid components for what it is, right? This is not going to be your fancy machine reel, but if you're looking for something inexpensive, this is a good one. You can get the reel alone for, I think, like $65, which is almost as cheap as you can get. It's crazy. You can get rods cheaper than you can get reels. That's because there's more parts and moving parts to reels. Hopefully your rod doesn't have any moving parts except for maybe the down-locking or up-locking reel seat. But I'll put a link to the Crosswater 4 over at this podcast show notes at castingacross.com. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. Please subscribe in your favorite podcast app and then rate the podcast on Spotify and on iTunes. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.